If this is your first time coming to any of our webinars, know this is part of a series where we look at psychosocial safety from an individual perspective, team perspective, organizational perspective, and then integrated perspective. And today we look at frameworks. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, let's make the most of it.
Okay. Oh my God. Today I was doing the slides and I lost track of time. So please excuse me. I have my cat sitting here, so he's a little bit upset because I'm moving him around. And okay, now we are all happy. Yeah, he's happy. I'm happy. Okay. So what's really been happening is that I'm trying to do these frameworks, but I'm also trying to kind of give everyone a picture of, what psychosocial safety risk management looks like on a holistic level, and just trying to um, set it set a bit of scene so that you understand from traditional safety point of view how to understand it. And I've been playing with that idea a lot, actually, which is why kind of just lost track of time. But I have an answer, which is great. So, first, for the introductions, let's say today's webinar is structures and frameworks, and we're going to talk about three structures. There are 18 structures. I have published around 8 now. It takes a lot of time to dig up all the information. I haven't, the published material isn't the best, and I'm not going to stand by it and say this is amazing and you go for it, but it's a good, comprehensive information, and I've tried to put as many references as I can so that you can sort of actually look for yourself. If you don't feel so great about the material, at least you've got the references there. All right, so first, as you know, Felix from MindMuse, amazing in his putting the webinars together. I am only doing the slides, by the way. Felix does everything, so I can't thank him enough. This wouldn't happen if he wasn't doing what he was doing, I can tell you that. And I'm from WHS Guard. I do the talking. That's all I do, just talk. All right. So today I have a little bit of an agenda. So I thought I'd put a bit of framework around our frameworks. Unintended, Felix. So why we're doing this, frameworks and the complexity, like what is this frameworks and what's happening with them and why the hell are we doing them? Anyway, and then we have radar, we have bridge. I haven't really spoken much about bridge. I've spoken about radar and shield. Um, as we progress, I'll start talking about the other frameworks as well. So this is like a little bit of a drip feed, but I think we'll talk about the more popular ones, easier ones first, and then we'll get into the complex ones. And then selecting and acting. So we're going to try and pull this apart, what's good for you, what's not good for you, and how to make it work. It is a lot of material heavy, so I might run through the slides, Felix, but that way at least they will have the slides to go through, and if in case they want to use the slides for their own presentations later on. And then any Q&As. All right, so why are we doing this? Just a quick recap, and I was looking at the stats this morning. As you know, psychosocial recoveries take 4 times longer, 3 times higher, and 60% of the organizations lack trained personnel to address psychosocial risk. Now, that was a very painful realization. But then it's a more contextual because what do you call trained personnel? You know, does it mean that all safety people are untrained in psychosocial? Or does it mean that if you attend a few webinars, you're now trained, you get a certificate? So it's very contextual. But I'm like, okay, you know what? What I take from that is, okay, a lot of us need to upskill. And we all are upskilling as we are going along. So all good. What I wanted to talk about was, and this is probably going to be my longest slide for today, is frameworks and the complexity. Now, why are we doing frameworks? What the hell they're about? You've got 18 things going on. There are more frameworks being developed on a daily basis. Why? So when you do traditional safety, just take a step back. You have your risk register, you have your risk assessments, and then you have your hazards, and then you have your controls, and then you have check your control effectiveness, and then you have, you do your actions, control effectiveness, and then you do the whole loop, right? It's pretty simple. What happens in psychosocial, because it's such a qualitative area, you can't really connect one action to one control to one outcome. that is where it gets confusing, it gets murky, it gets a little bit of muddy. But what we can identify is that we can say this, there are a set of actions which will lead to a set of outcomes. And when we talk about frameworks, these are coming from the industry, right? So people have taken this whole idea of psychosocial risk management, applied it to a particular industry, and made it work. And then they've come up with a framework. So you will find that each and every framework is actually specific to a job style, a particular type of risk, or a particular type of workforce, which is where our work as safety people comes in, that we're going to try and make sense of it. And we're going to try to help people who want to implement choose the right framework or develop one for themselves. But then also, um, sorry, that was my cat. um, but also kind of work with that in a way that you will get what you want from psychosocial risk assessment. Um, does that kind of make sense, Felix? Nod your head if you think I'm getting there with this. I have published 9. I've got 8 more to go. You can check my Substack if you want to, but we'll talk about them here as well. So it's because we're trying to make sense of the complexity. Other businesses I've known are doing it in many different ways. I know that they talk about cards and they talk about other, basically cards is also a collection of actions that you do to try to fix psychosocial risk. Excuse me, I have a cat problem. All right, off you go. Do not come back in. Sorry. It's a very busy day today. All right. So that's why we're doing this. And let's go to the radar system. Now, radar is probably the first and most popular one I want to kind of dig into. The reason I like to start with radar is because it actually focuses on the early indicators and the weak signals as we know it. What people really think is that psychosocial risk assessment is what comes when somebody complains of bullying or somebody starts talking about fatigue, anxiety, or too much change in an organization. That's really not when you're thinking of psychosocial risk. You want to think of psychosocial risk when people start the work and they start choosing silence in meetings, start avoiding engagements, start looking at, you know, uh, doing things in a way that's not normal. Those are the indicators that you want to pick up, because that's when you have the opportunity to change. When somebody just makes a wayward comment in the meeting and says, "Oh, well, that didn't happen too, right?" So you want to be able to pick up information in an organization at a point where you can actually make a change. When people are already talking about stress and fatigue, you've reached a burnout stage. And at that point, it is more of a wellness recovery kind of a scenario. It's not specifically a risk management kind of scenario. And what we need to understand is risk management is a holistic process. Uh, After you've already had somebody who's stressed, fatigued, or burnt out, that's already your situation where an incident has happened and you're looking at doing recoveries there. And the general process of doing a radar is you scan your environment, you gather your feedback, surveys, metrics. Metrics are important. You analyze whatever you've got, you document it, you act on it, and you review on it. It's fairly straightforward and fairly basic. What is the case for early identification? Why do we want to do it? Well, there's a human cost. 2 out of 5 leave due to poor mental health. That is documented. You have financial. I think I saw a post on LinkedIn of somebody who had done all these costing dollars and cents about how much it actually costs to hire a new person. So basically what you're looking at is you've got somebody who's left, you have the cost of procurement, cost of training, cost of your team doing the work while you upskill that person. So it's much more cheaper. It makes financial sense, right? Cheaper to have the people that you have and retain them. And then you have the performance and culture. The other side effect of having good mental health in an organization is that you get a good culture, and then because of which you get a good reputation, because of which people will want to come and work for you as an organization. And then the governance and due diligence. And that's basically the stick and carrot kind of a situation. You have to do it now in Australia because legislation says it. All right, bridge. So my bridge is not complete. I will put a better bridge on there. Um, I was drawing the bridge when I realized it's 11:58. So sorry about that. I will send you a better bridge. But let's talk about the bridge. The reason we call it a bridge is it was designed to connect the policy and the practice gap. And it goes without saying that without uh, implementation of policy, you really have nothing. So it aligns with ISO, and the WHS duties by embedding trust, respect, inclusion. Goes without saying that it has a lot to do with leadership. And we'll talk about the 6 pillars of Bridge. So, and this actually comes under the portfolio of leadership. So the bridge basically puts leadership in front center and tells them what they need to do and build. When you go actually into the detail of the bridge material, it will give you more information about how to do this. But we'll just talk about the pillars right now. Belonging and trust is one of them that needs to be developed. Inclusion and involvement, governance and accountability, respectful relationship, dialogue and communication, evaluation and evolution. Now, one thing I need to point out here is what you need to understand is all of these things are measurable. And you can put actions in place that will get you there. But a lot of it sits in the leadership portfolio. So when developing Bridge, people were like, we got to do this, but we need to start with the leadership. And here are the things that you need to have. Does that kind of make sense? And what they found was that leadership for psychological safety, they found team performance went up as the leadership behaviors modeled humility and respect. They invited feedback and listened actively, involved teams in decisions, and resourced appropriately and empowered workers. Okay. Next one is Shield, and that is my favorite. We all have our pet ones and favorite ones, and Shield is my favorite one at the moment because we haven't got anything better, and maybe because it's a little bit more widely applicable, and I like to talk about it. So, embed psychosocial risk thinking upstream. So you have the radar, which talks about your early indicators, and then you have Bridge, which kind of talks about bridging policy gap and implementation. Shield takes it to a little bit higher and says that we need to look at your governance structures in addition to the leadership and early indicators. Now, the reason I like this a little bit more is because governance is quite an ambiguous word. What does it really mean? How is it really going to show up in our business? So governance is all the collection of your, what they say, instructions, which we call policies and procedures that actually sit cohesively. How many times you look at 2 procedures in your own organization and you say, oh, well, that doesn't marry up. Well, this one says not to do this. So what do I do? And then people choose their own, right? When you have 2 procedures that don't align. So when I say governance, improve your governance, I mean not only have good oversight of how things are being done, but also make it more cohesive, something that talks to each other, which is simple enough, reflects what is being done. And then if you're not happy with what is being done, put in a process to uh, improve that, but make sure that your documentation is actually aligning with what is actually happening on the floor. So the shield process is signal detection, identify. So you identify workload, autonomy, supervision, and change load. This was basically done in places where there was what you call job rotation, shift work, and fatigue. So they have that kind of terminology. So like I said, each framework comes from a type of industry. Once you've identified your hazard, you do an impact assessment. You assess what's going to be the impact on it. And so you're actually not going straight to a survey. You're not going straight to the policy. You're actually taking a step back and saying, let's identify what are the hazards in this structure. And it's a more traditional safety approach. I quite like it because it's a familiar space for most of us. So we start with the hazards, and then we do a little bit of an impact assessment, and we evaluate the likelihood, consider cumulative exposure. Evaluation process is a process where you may do a survey, you may do focus groups, you may do one-on-ones. You may also, do industry scan and see what industry looks like. You can do a historical scan, and you bring all that qualitative information together to give you a bit of an idea of how severe it is, what are the controls that are in place, and what needs to happen. And then once you've done that, you bring leadership in, and then you do design, staffing, and then you do the sequencing. So basically, what you're doing is you have all the information, you bring the leadership in, and then you have the conversation, what they need to do, where they need to put their money, basically. And of course, then finally, you have the documentation, you record the hazards, actions, owners, review triggers. Reason I love this, and I do use this a lot more than others, is because once you do the shield process, you can actually update your health and safety risk register and with the psychosocial risks as they reflect. And you can put control owners in there. You can put control, what they say, people who are actioning the controls as well, and people who are accountable. So it gets, even though we say don't blame the people, I know, but that's after incidents. We need to have people doing the actions when you're doing the risk assessment. So this is a little bit of a different outlook to it. Goes without saying that when I'm doing safety, psychosocial safety, I'm not thinking in my head what framework I'm thinking. I'm actually thinking in my head, what can I take from each one of these frameworks that's going to help me do the psychosocial risk management system for this organization? That's why we need to know all of them or more of them. Okay, implementing Shield is very similar. So you triggers, those are kind of the pre-hazard things that you look at, what's triggering the hazard, you get your categories, you build the pack, then you do your pilot, and then you scale it and you evaluate. And you have the metrics and evaluation. You look at your risk quality, leading and lagging, all of that. That's all done, but then you have additionally a governance control process added on top of that. So, now you kind of are looking at it. Radar's fairly simple. Bridge takes it to a little bit next level, and then Shield takes it to even a little bit more complex level. It's not to say that we want to make it more complex. It's to say that depending upon your team, the risks that your team is experiencing, and the kind of business that you're doing, you use the framework that works for you. Okay. Now, a little bit of a compare. We've been just talking about compare, different systems and how they compare. I think I've already kind of talked these slides through, Felix, from the looks of it. So, but this will sort of help you, do a bit of an eyeball on what these frameworks do and what's their purpose, and what they're focusing on. So, for example, if you look at Bridge, it's to foster psychological safety and give people a voice. It's more culture building. And the strength is it builds a speak up culture. So there is also this leadership intention behind it as to what really you want to get from the activities that you're doing. You can cherry pick the various things that different frameworks have and make your own framework. And that will work too. In fact, that's more recommended. Selecting and applying framework. Chosen and available. How to choose? Understand your work system, review what's available frameworks across industries, select 1 to 2. I think we need to do one webinar on the Copenhagen system, Felix, because that's very well and tested, and it's been used in Denmark for years, and it's a little bit complex, but I think we can do it towards the end of the year. That'll be good. Select 1 or 2 that fit best to your context, customize to your structure, culture, and workflows, measure, learn, and improve. Easy peasy. How are we doing with time? I have lost track. Oh, look, I'm almost on time. Um, so cost of psychosocial risk, as you know, is high. Human, financial, reputational frameworks provide a structured guidance through complexity. And here you have three. Choose a framework to fit, adapt to your business. And any questions? I have finished.